We are live. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming on the Show Must Go On line. Today's guest is Pete Spence I, all the way across the sea. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good. Your British accent doesn't get any better with the years, does it really?
I was waiting for that one. You know, when I had Steve on, his friend said that it wasn't too bad. So I'm going to count that as a win. So as you can tell, everyone watching from home, that Spence, my dear friend from NJY Camps, is in fact British, chilling right now in Sheffield, I'm guessing, are you?
Yeah. Well, it's weird doing all these Zoom calls, isn't it? And things like that, because you get to see inside people's houses. And before we came on air, I was like, what's the best view? And all these Zoom calls that I'm seeing other people, it's like you're like, what's that in the background? And I don't know if you can see the city in the background. Do you recognize that if I tilt it up slightly?
Yeah.
So that's the Brooklyn Bridge. So yeah, little memory of New York and all that.
Oh, that's so much fun. Yeah, that's such a great transition here, because it's cool when you meet someone at camp, and camp friends, you become close so quickly. And with social media, you're able to stay in touch. And it's cool because the two of us kind of always went to see shows, and then we would visit each other in the UK and in New York. And I was just looking at the photos yesterday from my birthday when you came to visit me in London, and that was so much fun.
Yeah, no, it was good fun, isn't it? And the thing I always think about camp is you're in such a little bubble, like a social bubble, that it's weird that you can kind of meet people for 8-10 weeks and then they become one of your best friends. And it's crazy to think, what was it, 2009? So 11 years was probably the first time I met you, and you were 17 and a fresh-faced, what was it, pre-counselor? You weren't quite old enough to be a counsellor yet. And then I was teaching soccer out there. So, but yeah, I'd been teaching soccer since I was 16, and it was an opportunity to go out there and travel and stuff like that. And then we travelled after camp a little bit and came to see you in Scarsdale. You were living at the time with your mum and stuff, and came to a soccer game. But yeah, it's weird how quickly you go from knowing someone to being really good friends, isn't it?
It's so funny. I was wearing my Edgemont High School basketball sweatshirt last night, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, remember when Spence saw me play soccer over there? I was going to call it football, because it's funny to hear you call it soccer.
Yeah. Well, I thought I better, use an American term, being on an American show and all that.
Fair. But I feel like people also, when they hear the accent, they can kind of make that translation in their head.
Yeah, soccer does sound weird. Yeah.
It does. So, and it's interesting too, because football has started to come back across the world. It started in Germany coming back, right? And no. It was wasn't it a smaller place first?
To my knowledge, it was German football came back first, because we didn't have football over here. And the radio station that we work for, that I do kind of reporting and producing for, is called Radio Derby. And one of the, if you don't know where it is, it's nowhere near London for all the Americans, because that's the first question. It's like, is that near London? Or is that Wales near London? It's like, no. Derby's kind of right bang smack in the middle of the UK. So if you pretty much threw a dart at the middle of England, that's kind of where it is. And so the big team for the city there is Derby County, who play in the Championship. So you've got the Premier League, and then you've got the Championship below it, which is the kind of next league down. And there was no football, so we adopted a German team, and the team, the town that Derby is twinned with, is called Osnabrück. So we adopted Osnabrück VFL as our team to play a second tier or it might even be the third tier in German football. So for a couple of weeks, we were following them and seeing how they were doing and chatting to the coaches and the staff and stuff like that. And they couldn't believe it. They were like, we don't really understand why you're interested in us, but okay, And I think it's just such a football town, Derby, that it was one of those that it was quite nice to follow something different and learn about a different place and stuff like that. So, but obviously now football's back. Derby about playing again. So everyone's kind of focused on, the playoff push. Are they going to get into the playoffs? And then obviously here in Sheffield, you've got Sheffield United just been promoted to the Premier League this year. So yeah, everyone's kind of looking at that, whether or not I think did they beat Chelsea today? I haven't quite seen all of the football results, but a lot of people are kind of really excited about how Sheffield United are doing in the Premier League this year.
Yeah, that is such an exciting journey. And it's so interesting with the English Premier League that, here in the US, it's so different. Like you're either like at the top level or you're a, AA team or you're a college team. Like you don't really get promoted based off of how you play, which is different, of course, as you were just saying, that you can get promoted based off of your, your record for the year before. And it's so interesting to see the differences and how that like affects fandom and like how if you get to the next level, like have you noticed, is it a bit different, like being in Sheffield right now? Or I guess right now is just a crazy time anyway, but with the Premier League.
I think, like Sheffield, for people that don't know, is kind of split into two halves. You're either Sheffield United or you're Sheffield Wednesday. Please don't ask me which one I am, because it's Anyway, it's neither. It's actually neither. But that's the first question when someone asks, "Are you from Sheffield?" It's like, "Are you Sheffield Wednesday or are you United?" And I've worked behind the scenes in football and kind of covered or been part of the production team that's covered all of the 5 or 6 teams around this area. So you kind of have a soft spot and look out for them in the results and stuff like that. But yeah, it's put the whole lockdown football thing has put a different slant on kind of things, really, because there are teams that obviously we haven't got the leagues below the Championship playing at the moment. So that's League One and League Two. And then below you getting into kind of the Conference, National League, the lower tiers of football there. And there are a lot of teams that aren't playing. So League One and League Two never came back. They just, after lockdown, that's where the season finished. And there are teams that obviously would have got promoted from League One who are coming into a league that's still playing. So then you're going to have, for example, the Championship is still playing. There are 3 teams that are going to get relegated and go down into League One or Two, but they don't know what the budget's going to look like, what teams are going to look like, because obviously there's free agents, transfers, all that stuff that happens in the off season, and a lot of clubs and managers don't know what's happening really. So it's a lot of uncertainty for a lot of people, and the promotion relegation thing makes it all the kind of more, I guess, interesting to some extent, worrying for some people, because some people have got stakes in this club. We're talking about, players' livelihoods, because when you get down to League One, League Two, players potentially aren't making too much money, and then you get kind of Championship, Premier League, where you're talking about multi-million-pound deals and things like that. So it's football in this country there are many different levels and many different tiers, really.
That's such an interesting point you bring up, because when you think about athletes on like that high level, they're making a bonkers amount of money. I mean, they're also being like scrutinized for everything. And that's,
I mean, nothing like Patrick Mahomes or anything like that, but
Fair. But it is so interesting that you can be making so much money and then be relegated because of your team and making I don't know how much, League One or Two, like they're making, but that is a huge difference for these people's livelihoods. I didn't really think of it that way.
And when a team gets, for example, if you're in the Premier League, which is the top tier in the UK, if you get relegated, the team gets what's called parachute payments. So you'll get, X amount of million to kind of bridge the gap between, you might have players that are, as you said, on bonkers wages. And then all of a sudden your club drops to the next level. They haven't got the TV revenue anymore. They haven't got, all of the other stuff, the advertising, some of the sponsorship starts to go away and stuff. So there's a bit of a financial cushion to kind of help them through the next, I think they get it over 3 seasons. So it to kind of gradually they get less over the next 3 seasons, so they can kind of phase out and acclimatize to being in another league. Or some teams will get relegated and bounce straight back up. There are plenty of teams like that they're called yo-yo teams. They constantly get relegated, promoted, yet relegated, promoted over a couple of seasons. And then there are some teams that just go into free fall. They'll get relegated and then they don't cope with adjusting to the different style of football in a different league, and they'll just get relegated. And that's what for a long time happened to Sheffield United. They got down to League One, and then in the last 4 years they've gone from League One to the Premier League. So they've had pretty much a meteoric rise the last 4 years, really.
Wow. So interesting. And to switch from football to hockey, something I know you cover, I didn't realize that there was like a hockey league in the UK that was pretty competitive until I started following you on Twitter and seeing you post about them.
Yeah, so the transition for me from, because I when I started in radio, it was pretty much a year after I got back from summer camp, and I got offered a year to come back for a fourth year to be a soccer coach, and I couldn't because I was doing stuff at the BBC then in Sheffield, behind the scenes, working on football, on production and stuff like that, desk driving and all that kind of stuff, answering the phones, we'd do like a weekly phone in and that kind of thing. So a bit of stuff behind the scenes there. And then, I was kind of working on the football show on a Saturday or a Tuesday night or whatever, getting a few other shifts here and there. And I was kind of missing going to live sporting events. It's kind of, I'd always been to rugby or football or stuff like that. And there's an ice hockey club here called the Sheffield Steelers that play normally it's on a Saturday or a Sunday. Normally they have 2 games a weekend. So they're normally at home for one of those. And if I wasn't at the, working on the football, I'd go to the hockey. And it's a kind of, hockey in the UK is there are different points of view on this, but I'd say it's very much a family sport in the UK. Generations of the same family go. And I was missing live sport and went to a game, and with my kind of journalist hat on, it was during the NHL lockdown. I'm forgetting what year now, but it was there's a player that I'm sure you'll be aware of, Tom Sestito, who obviously during the lockdown came over and he signed for Sheffield because obviously they weren't playing hockey in America at the time. And he came over, signed for the Sheffield Steelers, and he was a big deal when he was here. And it was his first game. He was on debut. I think he had a fight on his first night out from memory. And I thought it's bonkers that there are no journalists from our radio station here covering it. There was a guy that was doing reporting, but he'd moved on to work at 5 Live and the World Service in Manchester, so wasn't doing so much stuff. So I knew the press officer, rang him up, and he was downstairs behind the scenes. And I said, look, I've got my microphone, I've got my phone in the car. Can I come down and just do an interview? So I did the head coach, and I spoke to Tom Sestito and did an interview. Went back the next day to the radio station. I said to the sports editor, I've got this material if you want it. Do you want to use it? And he said, yeah. And he said, is this something you're going to regularly? And I said, I'm going to most home games at the moment because of the reasons I explained. And then he said, well, if you want to cover this going forward, then feel free. And then I picked up a couple of other minority sports along the way as well. Basketball, covered a couple of big boxing bouts that they've got at the Sheffield Arena as well. So that's kind of how it evolved, really. And how many years have I been doing it now? 7, 8 years later, it's a staple of what I'm doing in terms of reporting, social media, behind the scenes interviews, signing announcements, that kind of thing. So it just kind of fell into it really that way. And it's amazing how it's kind of evolved, really. A couple of years ago, I was doing live commentaries from Belarus and Copenhagen when the Steelers were playing in Europe. They won a big championship just before lockdown, won the Challenge Cup. So they're a very successful hockey team in the UK. They're kind of, the way to describe it is, and I'm not sure if this will work for the American viewers, but they're described in the UK as the Manchester United of the ice hockey world. So I'm not quite sure how to contextualize that for an American audience, but they are the most kind of well-known hockey team in the UK. One of the they're the team that other teams love to beat, basically. Yeah, I guess that's a comparison, and then you've got the kind of big rivalry with nearby Nottingham, which is kind of like an hour and a half down the road. And I guess you could describe them as the New York Mets, although they've won a few more things than the Mets over the years. So I'm not really sure that's a fair comparison for Nottingham, really. But
could do the Red Sox.
You could do the Red Sox, yeah. No, that's probably a bit more of a fair comparison. But there's kind of 10 teams in the top tier. So there's 3 Scottish teams. There's teams in the south, and a majority of teams are kind of in the north and in the Midlands, really. So,
right.
But yeah, I mean, Steelers will get 9,000 at the most at a game, all the way down to kind of, they've been averaging about kind of 6,500, 7,000 over the last few years. So yeah, hockey in the UK has got a big following.
That's amazing. It's so much fun to hear these stories, and especially that like your passion is what kind of drew you to this new aspect of your career, because no one told you to do this. It was quite the opposite. You just like took it into your own hands and you're like, I want to do this, and you did it. And that's amazing, inspiring, like part of how like bwaySHO happened, right? Like I was like, there's this thing I want to do. I love Broadway, and I'm going to create bwaySHO. Which, to everyone who's like, I thought you're a theater reporter, I am, but I used to be a sports reporter, and Spence and I used to talk all the time about sports. And do you remember when I left camp to cover the Everton game?
Yeah. You've been over and seen your fair share of British football as well, haven't you? So yeah, no, it's interesting. And I've always had a big love of American sports. I mean, you guys do the glitz and the glamour better than anyone else. You look at the NFL, and even down to like Friday night football games. And when you were working in Texas, we'd talk every now and again. You'd be out covering a high school football game or anything like that, and probably your theatre fans are probably thinking that's quite far removed from the kind of thing that you do now. But sports is another one of your passions, and that's kind of where it took you. So. Yeah, it's interesting to think how you went into it and kind of where you are now, and it's sort of the same for me. When I became a journalist, I did a sports journalism degree. I thought at the time I was going to go into writing for newspapers because that's all I knew. I didn't know that you could be a sports journalist, apart from the odd 2 or 3 guys that you see doing football commentary on the telly, and it's always the same pool of kind of 5 to 10 guys, and you just think that's way out of reach. And then you fall into it and you realize that there's all these different levels, and people are doing especially now with the fact that you can do webcasts and you can do online radio broadcasts and stuff over Facebook and all kinds of stuff like that. That even in the last 8 years of me doing what I've done, it's that's come so far. So yeah, it's interesting to see how the whole industry's evolved. And yeah, I never saw myself falling into radio or anything like that. It just kind of happened, and you wake up one day and you go, actually, if I look back to where it came from, it's quite a transition, really. Right.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I also think that there is kind of that connection between theater and sports, in the fact that like there's that exciting factor. Like the people who are passionate about the sports or the theater are very passionate about it, and they can just talk about like, the same way someone could say, oh, in 2003, blah, 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 won the English Premier League, can say like, oh, won the Tony Award for this, or, oh yeah, like Audra McDonald's won, I think 6 Tony Awards. And you could say the same for like a Premier League player or someone from Sheffield Steelers. That like, there's that aspect of being so much of a fan, even if you are a reporter, that there's like that combination that your reporting is actually better when you are a fan. You have to like remove it like slightly when you're actually like chatting with them, but it's the passion that I think other people appreciate in the reporting. Do you find that's true?
I think it's the live element, isn't it? You know, that's kind of what the theatre's about. It's that live interaction. Every night's different with a different audience kind of thing. And, you know, you're kind of watching someone do something physically in front of you. Yeah. You know, and growing up where I did in Stratford upon Avon, you've got the Royal Shakespeare Company, which is in the town. So, you know, growing up, theatre was something that, you know, I was always exposed to from an early age. I used to go to the theatre with my mum, and then, you know, when I got older, you know, you'd go to I guess the equivalent of, you know, rush tickets. You'd go and you'd get like a £10 student ticket for whatever, and it wouldn't always be Shakespeare. You know, they'd put on, you know, Christmas productions or musicals or stuff like that. And Stratford is outside of London. It's the place actors want to work. So, you know, growing up, you know, I'd see, you know, Patrick Stewart would come and do, you know, Macbeth or The Tempest or something like that, and then you'd go home and you'd go, hang on, that's Jean-Luc Picard off Star Trek, who, you know, I've just seen on the stage. And, you know, actually, if you go back, like people like Dame Judi Dench have done, you know, the RSC and things like that. So it's interesting to see, you know, when you look back, you know, my mum, like you, I'm sure, keeps all of the programs and the pamphlets and things like that. And actually, when you go back and you look back at who you've seen, you know, that's quite interesting to see kind of how people have transitioned in their careers and kind of things like that. You look back and you go, wow, actually, I saw them way back when they were doing that. And actually, I was looking back at an old England program when I was 10. I think I went to my first England football game, and it was at the old Wembley. Wembley, because Wembley Stadium's been redeveloped now with the Twin Towers. And I look back in the program, and you had players like Michael Owen and Joe Cole and players like that were playing, but it wasn't the England international team. It was an England schoolboys team. So, you know, these kids were like 15, 16, you know, playing on smaller dimension pitches, you know, just I think it was a friendly tournament or something, or a schoolboys international game or something like that. So I always think it's interesting to flick back through those old programs every now and again and say, well, look where they are now and what they went on to do and kind of things like that.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a good point. I need to like go through. I see Mama Medney's here commenting. We should go through when I'm back in New York, the playbills, because it is so funny to think, like, I've looked through some of the old photos that I have on Facebook. It's crazy to think how much social media has like evolved over the last 10 years, because, you know, some of the photos that we have, like in the cover photo is us from Mary Poppins, which is was so much fun. And like, you know, having that little documentation of like, oh, I did see this actor, and like, now look where they are. Like, especially when I saw Spring Awakening with Jackie, another camp friend that, you know, we saw so many people that now I like look at and be like, oh my God, like I saw Gerard Canonico, was just in Be More Chill, and like seeing this like 10-year-old photo of me with Gerard was like, whoa. And then like, you know, Matt Doyle, which like all of these, you know, if you're a theater fan, you know these names, but it is so funny. And I also want to say, if y'all are here, I can see your comments. Alyssa, hello. Mama Benny, hello. And if you're seeing this later, shalom. This is a special Shabbat edition, which felt very appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching the Hamilton musical on Disney Plus today in kind of preparation for this, because I thought it might come up. And one of the actors that me and my wife, when we were watching it, we were like, who's that guy? And it was, and I'm probably about to butcher his name now, but I've tried to pronounce it, but it's Okoreti Onadawan. Have I said that right?
Yeah, Oak.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of like American dramas anyway, and he's in the Grey's Anatomy spin-off on ABC called Station 19 about firefighters in Seattle and stuff like that. And me and my wife both went, oh, you know, that's the guy off that show, isn't it? And it's funny actually that we knew him from that, obviously before Hamilton, because obviously we hadn't seen it, but in his career, that's the thing that got him that next part. So it's that was one of the things watching it that I was like, where do I know that guy from? And I was like, oh, it's that it's that ABC series, the Grey's Anatomy spin-off. So yeah.
That's so funny because you hear that with like Chris Jackson, who plays the general, George Washington, and since we were talking about my mom, she'll be like, "Oh yeah, that's the guy from Bolt," and I was like, "No, that's the guy from Hamilton." It's funny because you hear that reaction all the time from theater fans, like, no, he might be more, more widespreadly known through like a different generation, maybe because of their TV thing, but they got there because of theater. And it's like, ooh, don't you say that. And then like, I think he sang on an episode or whatnot. And everyone's like, I didn't know he could sing. And the idea that hearing that someone didn't know Chris Jackson could sing, ooh.
Yeah. But there's so many people in that you now look at and you say, oh, actually, they've gone on to, to great things. And I bet it's not just the Broadway cast as well, the 2016 New York cast, as we've spoken about before, there's casts all over the country, Chicago or, LA or wherever, there's, London cast and all sorts. So, all these people are getting their break in, these kind of, a big smash hit musical like Hamilton, and going on to bigger and better things.
Yes, exactly. The nice thing is when you're in such a big musical, I mean, Hamilton is really like one of a kind, right? Like it's revolutionary, and just having that on your resume or your CV, if you will, it adds to it for sure.
Yeah. I wasn't quite sure how it was going to translate, because obviously I don't tend to like watching theatre on the TV because I think you miss something. And I think maybe it did miss a little bit of something in watching it on the TV rather than watching it in a live environment. Because, sometimes your eye will be drawn to what the backup dancers are doing in the background or how the stage is lit. Or I always quite enjoy watching how, the set, sometimes you get the set moves in strange ways, or they take furniture on and off and stuff like that. So I quite like watching all of what's going on, whereas sometimes the way it's filmed, you get close-ups on the lead characters or whatever, or that's where the focus is, you lose a bit of something. But I thought it came across really well. It was feel good. It made you think, didn't it? Especially with what's going on at the moment, the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests that we've seen in the US and the UK. It's one of those things that there's a lot of stuff in there about civil rights and, all that kind of important stuff, and they were talking about it back then when, the US was in its infancy, and, it's still unfortunately a discussion that we're having on, at the moment, but no less important.
That's such a good point. The line that's been ringing in my head a lot is, we'll never be free until we end slavery. And it feels like with the Black Lives Matter movement that it's just, I've heard a lot of people say that it's just taken on a new form, right? Like the fact that police can brutally murder a Black man, woman, non-binary in the streets, and they need all of these petitions to get the police officers arrested and charged. Like that should just be like, oh, you murdered someone and we saw it on film, we should book you. But there are all these like police problems here, and it's just like, I feel like even when you're having like a nice conversation about theater, it does get political because these actors, like a lot of people have been saying, like, you can't see Hamilton and support the musical and then not support Black lives. And we're not talking about like, the specific organization Black Lives Matter. We're talking about the movement. This is not a moment, it's the movement. It's another Hamilton reference. I know you like just saw it, and I don't know how fresh it is for you, but I love Hamilton. I've seen it all the way across the sea in London the day we met up, when John took me for my birthday, which was pretty cool. And actually, okay, let's talk a little bit more about Hamilton and the theater experience and seeing it in film. Because, so just to make sure, was this your first time seeing Hamilton?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hadn't read the history, hadn't read the backstory, because I don't like any of that. When I go and see something in the theatre or whatever, I think, actually, I don't want to be thinking, oh, we've still got half an hour left because they've got to do X, Y, and Z in the story, or this plot twist is coming. You want it to be fresh the first time you see it. So, actually, I probably shouldn't have been doing this at all, but I was Googling as I was going through, the history of, is it the Schuyler family? Is that
Skylar?
Skylar. I wasn't quite sure how you pronounced it, but yeah, it's kind of like, I was Googling the history of that. There was a little bit of confusion for me in the fact that some of the early characters go on to play, your James Madisons and your George Washingtons, or was he George Washington, or was he Philip Schuyler, or, so there was a bit of that early on, add that into the fact that, it's hip hop and jazz, and, they're effectively singing / rapping a lot of the lyrics. You have to kind of, there was about 20 minutes of kind of tuning my ear into kind of picking up the gist of the dialogue. And I'm sure if you go back, and I can now see, going and watching it again and picking up, new thing. I'm sure every time you watch it, you pick up something else. Or if you listen to the audio tape of the Broadway show or whatever, then you pick up different things at every point, because, there's so much actually. I looked at it and I was like, wow, 2 hours 40, that's a long run time. But actually, you're cramming so much, vital American history and politics and stuff that's, it's pretty complicated to get in all of there. So actually, I found myself on Google, like doing it but not doing it until it came up in the story. And I thought, if I read ahead too much, then it's gonna ruin it or whatever. And so no, it was interesting, because I'm sure, like a lot of Americans before they went and saw this, how many people could honestly say that they knew the story of Hamilton and, his role in being a founding father, really.
Right. It's a lot of people laugh about when they translate it from like the US audience to the UK audience, because they're like, oh, well, the UK audience, they don't know a lot of the history. And we're like, we don't know the history. They don't do a good job teaching us. Like, they've added like the EduHam, which is the Hamilton education program, to high schools throughout the country. And it's been like this important aspect to teaching school kids our history, because I hated US history growing up. I thought it was so boring, like all these old white men doing stuff, like, no thank you, that's not appealing to me. But now you get a diverse cast on that stage, and they're like rapping and jazz, as you're saying, like it makes it interesting. And now, like, you've got some of the dates that are just part of a song. So you're like 17, like you've got the ways that even growing up in high school and elementary school, I remember some of my teachers would like teach us something in song, like X equals negative B plus or minus square root 4 square over. This was 9th grade. All over.
It's in there somewhere.
That's like a math thing from 9th grade that I somehow have like 90% still in my brain. That's crazy. Haven't thought of that in forever. But it's amazing the power of music, and how, like, even though, of course, this isn't like everything, because you can't possibly teach everything in a 2-hour, 40-minute musical. Like, that would be impossible. But it does a pretty good job of spanning as much time with as much detail as possible. And I love that you seeing like Daveed Diggs playing the Marquis de Lafayette and then Thomas Jefferson. You're like, I think that's the same guy. What is he doing?
Well, you can't get away from that on the TV, because there's the close up, and then but it takes you a while to go, okay, so there's a uniform change in there. So, for me, it was the fact that he was playing Lafayette, who then went to France, and then Jefferson came back from France to obviously, so that was the one for me that was a little bit difficult. And then the guy that played George Washington, at points he was George Washington, and then at points he was Philip Schuyler, obviously.
Oh no, you're
Eliza's dad wasn't. Oh, is it two different people?
Yeah.
See,
So there's Anthony
and I only
Ramos.
watched it 3 hours ago. So
Anthony Ramos played John Lawrence as like the Sons of Liberty, and then he played Philip Schuyler. Chris Jackson plays the president, George Washington, going from George Washington into the presidency throughout. But believe me, you are not alone in being confused and trying to keep it all together. Like, this is years worth of like obsession over this musical that I like have it down pat. But it's so funny. It is like, I do love that nod though about the France. There was a line that Lin-Manuel said to David in rehearsal, I think one day when they were going over the lines. There's the line, before he was your friend, he was mine. But then he goes, before he was your friend, he was you, because he played a different character. Yeah. That was brilliant.
But I did enjoy it. Like I said, it took me about a good 20 minutes to get into the pace of it and how quick it was and stuff like that. But it's obviously, done such a good job of kind of, what could be on paper quite a dry bit of history, albeit, important part of history. Yeah. That's it's a way of kind of getting kids excited about politics and history and looking at this kind of important aspect of history, but also kind of explaining it. You throw into the mix, a sex scandal, gunfights, all that, big battles, Yorktown and all that kind of stuff. It's, there's so much in there, and that kind of, 35-year period of history, they crammed a lot into that, really, in terms of 2 hours, 40 minutes or whatever it was.
Yeah. And it's so, a lot of people have been having this discussion over the last week or two about, well, like, Hamilton could have this filmed, so why can't all the other shows? And there are like a few aspects about that, right? Like, this was a big budget project, right? Like, you needed to have something at the status of Hamilton that had the funding, that would be bought by a company like Disney to have something like this. And, it was supposed to be a theatrical release. And then, of course, they moved it up a year because of COVID and whatnot. And I think it actually worked out well for them in the fact that, like, people had something that they could rally behind and watch this. Like, anyone who has Disney Plus or access to Disney Plus, like, even if, some people were complaining that, like, oh, they took away their free trial. Like, you're about to see this musical with the original cast shot in like high definition for $6.99, and you also get like all of Marvel, all of Star Wars, all of Disney. Like, come on.
It's like, if you went to see that in the theater and you didn't have rush tickets, that you'd be looking at like $60, wouldn't you? Plus, probably to see that cast at the time.
$60. If you try,
I'm not.
Get
yeah, they're not you though. They're not you going to the theater, because I don't think I've ever seen a theater show for more than $20 with you. But
I know. See, I'm very thrifty. I love a good rush ticket.
But I'm talking about height of 2016. If you're going to go and see that,
thousands.
and it's
bonkers. It's so crazy. Like, I mean, the tickets back then were sold out to the point that, like, if you were lucky to get a ticket, it would be through a scalper who then raised the price like an absurd amount of money.
So what were you looking at? Hundreds? Thousands.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, I've heard some crazy stories, right? Like, when I first saw Hamilton, I was on holiday from working in Texas, and I came back for 1 week during Hanukkah. And this was right after most of the original cast left, but there were still a few like ensemble members and Javier Munoz who like kind of co-created the role of Alexander Hamilton with Lin. Like, he would do matinees, like the Sunday matinee. So we got to see him. And I didn't think I'd even be able to get a ticket, but I went to the box office, which, like, side note, if you're ever in town, go to the box office, of course, when like theaters open again. But it's so much better than getting it online because there are all these fees, and like they can usually help you out if, you know, like you were between two things. Anyway, that's my PSA / you can always ask me because I love giving like spy on the inside tips about Broadway.
You should so do, if you haven't done this already on your YouTube channel, you should so do a you know, Samantha Medney's guide to rush tickets, cheap tickets, how to, you know, do well in the lottery and that kind of thing. You know, it's literally a crash course. I think what I'm trying to think what we saw, and this probably would have been 2009, 2010. So I think we saw 3 or 4 productions, didn't we? And I think I desperately wanted to see Avenue Q, but that was off Broadway. So I think that might be the only one that I think we went to go and see that. It was a matinee performance or something like that because we couldn't get cheap tickets for an evening show. So, or maybe I went on my own. I know I definitely saw Avenue Q one year,
it's
and then
so
we
funny.
saw
American
Idiot.
Yep.
We saw American Idiot. We saw Mary Poppins, and then we saw.
Did we see the Book of Mormon that time?
No, we saw the Book of Mormon when I came with my wife. Yeah, we came in 2000 and I'm trying to think now. 2015 was it?
I think it was like right before you got engaged.
So we got married in 2018. So 2016 we would have been engaged. So yeah, 2015, the summer of 2015.
Wow. Yeah, I'm trying to think what that other one would have been that we saw, because I was looking at the photos and Mary Poppins, which is also funny with the whole like Lin-Manuel was in Mary Poppins Returns, and then we saw Mary Poppins on Broadway. It's all connected.
Oh, Wicked. Was it Wicked? No, I saw Wicked in San Francisco.
No,
I'm trying to think now. This is really going to bother me.
I've been thinking all day trying to figure out what that last one was, because we have a photo together with it's funny, Rob McClure talking about like looking back at old things, who's also been in Beetlejuice, Something Rotten. He's like been in a million things. He's now the lead in Mrs. Doubtfire, and he's in the poster that we posed with at Avenue Q.
And we went to go and see after Mary Poppins. We met 2 people at the stage door, didn't we? The lead that was playing Mary Poppins, who name escapes me, but she was an English actress. And I remember we were talking about stuff that she'd done at the RSC, going back to what we were talking about earlier on. And then there was that other guy that was in it. Trying to think what his name is as well, without going back and looking at who we tagged in the photo. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah. And it amazes me in New York about how few people wait at the stage door afterwards. I mean, I don't know with the whole Hamilton thing if it's different now, or if the bubble's blown on that whole thing now. But when we were going to shows back in 2009, 2010, 2011, there were like 10 people there, if that, 8, 10.
It's crazy. It really, really depends on the show. Like you said with Hamilton, bonkers. Like even now, right? Like even right before the pandemic, when I went to see the show, like the queue outside to line up was solid, right? It was like a good, like the whole barricade, maybe like 2 or 3 rows deep. You get a show like Be More Chill that had this like huge viral sensation. That was a madhouse, and they did a brilliant job like keeping it safe. And my friend Zach, who's actually like kind of in charge of like the Sharpies and making sure, like he was a stage door guy, he made sure everything was like good and kosher and whatnot. But it's so interesting to see. I think now with like social media, it's like weird to keep being like, no, it's social media because I'm old, but like having the, the access to knowing that the stage door exists, and like Hadestown is always like a huge one. And even like going from Broadway to the West End, like seeing Hamilton, well, that was also interesting because there was like there was a huge storm that started coming after we saw the show. So we're like in the alleyway where you go to like get your signatures, and the wind is just like blowing our hair. And the actors, to their credit, like still came out, still signed, still took pictures. We couldn't believe it. Then it started to like downpour, and we're like, okay, like, thank you. We will let you go home. Like, we know you also have a life. And I was amazed that they even came out with that, because sometimes if it's like that bad weather, like they'll call it a day, or, you know, they'll come with their umbrella or whatnot. But yeah, it's interesting to see how different shows have different like reactions to stage doors. And it's just, I miss it. I'm sad I didn't see Avenue Q with you. I did see it, like the final performance off Broadway last year, but it would have been so much fun to see it then. I must have had something else going on when you said, like, you know, you went the matinee and then we saw something in the evening, or because I remember that it was off Broadway and we were trying to figure out tickets. It's so like going back 10 years though. Whew.
I don't know if that was 2009 or that might have been a later year. I'm trying to think what was on 2009, because I remember looking round in Times Square at the billboards, and I'm sure it was stuff like In the Heights. Is it 29 Steps? I
know that, maybe.
Sorry, I've put you on the spot horribly there. Probably thrown you under the bus there. 39. But I'm trying to. I
don't want to.
I think I'm sure Mamma Mia was on.
Right.
I'm trying to think. I think Come Fly With Me was on there.
Right. Look at you.
Yeah, I know. I'm really trying to wrap my brain. Obviously, Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
And then American Idiot, and then of course The Lion King. But you know, it was, yeah. No, that's as good as the brain's going to be today, I think. But yeah, it's really going to annoy me what this other show was that we went to see, and we can't remember. But anyway, we'll move on.
Like, was it a big one? Like, I'm trying to think if this was like, we couldn't find like what we wanted to. So okay, quick little backstory here. Growing up, like camp friends and I, whether it be like Jackie, Jess, Heather, like the US squad, or with the UK squad with Spence and Steve, who was on this series earlier, and Tom and whatnot, we would go wake up in the morning and like, you know, we had this other friend, Daniel, who'd come in from New Jersey, and Jackie would come in from Long Island, and I'd come in from like either Westchester, I was in the city, and we would just meet up like in Times Square, and we would be like, okay, what do we want to try to see today? And we'd go to the box office at wee hours early in the morning, and we'd be like, hey, do you have any student rush or regular rush? Yay or nay? Do you have any standing room? Yay or nay? Okay, thank you. Next. And we would go like box office to box office, trying to see who had tickets that were like a reasonable price. I mean, like you said, I didn't spend more than $20 or $30 on a ticket until Jackie and I saw Spring Awakening, and it was like the final 2 weeks, and they had a rush ticket that was like $55, and we were like, okay, boom. And it's so interesting, like that people don't know about rush and lottery and standing room. Like that's how I've seen much Broadway. People go to
TKTS, don't they? And they think that's the only way to get theatre tickets. And you know, me and Gemma did that in London. We went to go see a show in the West End. We ended up, and we didn't know what we wanted to see. Gemma said, let's see anything but Lion King, because she always wanted to see Lion King with her mum. And she did that, I think, a year ago or 2 years ago. And I said, it's controversial, this one, but I'm not that bothered about cats. So we were kind of, it's one of Gemma's favorite musicals. And for me, it's too out there. Like I don't get the story, and it's not. I can appreciate the acting and appreciate the singing and appreciate the movement and the being in the crowd and stuff, but it's never been one of my favorites. And we ended up seeing Jersey Boys at the Shaftesbury Theatre, and it was absolutely brilliant. And to this day, and I know it's one of those that probably people have seen as like their first musical, and it was made into a film and stuff like that. So everyone's probably comparing it to the film and stuff. But I thought it was brilliant, and it was another one of these that I never knew the story of. You know, the 4 seasons before seeing Jersey Boys. You know, I didn't even know that's what it was about. But we went to the Shaftesbury Theatre, and you know, Gemma was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, we're just seeing if there's any rush tickets or whatever, or what the equivalent is in the UK or whatever." And they didn't call it rush, but it was something else. And I think because Gemma had the equivalent of a student card, it's called an NUS card over here, so she got a discount on her tickets, and we were sat. We weren't in the nosebleed seats by any means, but it was kind of like circle towards the back near the aisle kind of thing. So, you know, but it wasn't restricted view or anything like that. But yeah, and you know, got great seats, and I think we ended up seeing 2 shows because I think we also went to see Matilda in the West End as well, because we'd gone there with a budget thinking we can see one musical we really want to see or show that we really want to see. This is our budget, and because we got the rush tickets, we ended up seeing 2 over the course of 3 days. So it was like, yay, small win.
That's great. That's so much fun. Oh, I love hearing that. And yeah, I've seen Jersey Boys twice, and I agree, it's very interesting to see it. I just find it funny to see that in London. Like there are certain shows that, you know, like, you know, I feel like, look, a musical is a musical, and performers are brilliant no matter where they are. But it's so funny to me, the idea of like a New Jersey, like a proper New Jersey story being told there. And the Shaftesbury Theatre, I think, is where Anne Juliet is now.
I'll take your word for that.
Anne Juliet, Spence, when theater comes back to the UK, I think I told you this when I saw you in London, but Anne Juliet is like so much happiness. It's like, I'm not usually super big fan of like the jukebox musicals, as they call it. Like, I think they're good, and some of them are like really great, and some of them are like okay. But this takes what would be a jukebox musical, because they're using a lot of those songs like Oops, I Did It Again, and like Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and Katy Perry and Kelly Clarkson and whatnot. But they weave it so well into the story, and they kind of like repurpose them. And I love Anne Juliet. I love it so much that when John and I went to see it on a Thursday when we were in London, and we had like that Friday slot open to see like, you know, whatever else. We really went to London with like Hamilton tickets on my birthday, and then like, let's see what else happens. Like, you know, and we did Rush, and they do like Today Ticks. They have like the lottery for that as well. And we saw a bunch of shows, but we had that Friday slot open, and he really wanted to see Mamma Mia. And I'm like, I've seen Mamma Mia. I would see it again, but I'm going to see Anne Juliet.
So you can come with me, or you can not. But either way, I'm going to see Anne Juliet.
Yeah.
But see, I thought the
funny.
same thing. I thought the same thing before we went to go and see American Idiot, because I'm a big Green Day fan, and at that time, that American Idiot album was huge. Yeah. And it was like, oh, how am I going to feel? Like, you know, I've been to see Green Day live in concert and stuff, and it's like, how am I going to feel seeing a stage production? And I think after a while, you're kind of so caught up in the story that you're not really, you know, it's not really a thing. And obviously, I haven't seen Anne Juliet, so yeah, I can't really comment on how interwoven the tunes are, or whether or not you notice it or whatever. But yeah.
It's the funny part about it is, well, I guess there are kind of 2 different types of jukebox musicals. You've got your, you know, the ones like Tina and Ain't Too Proud and Jersey Boys, where you're using the music to also tell the story of this band. Whereas like Anne Juliet or Jagged Little Pill, Green Day, like they use the music, but it's in a different story.
It's because it's an album that tells a story, isn't it? Rather than obviously with Tina, it's like telling her story, and then the hits are intermingling, and the same with Jersey Boys, isn't it?
Right. So that's and I'm so glad I did. I've told this story before on the series, but it all comes back to Hamilton because so John has seen Hamilton in person 48 times, which is absurd.
That is an absurd amount of, yeah.
Right.
When you can do the show along with the performers in your head, probably that's the time to cut yourself off and
right. You're doing like the dance moves and whatnot. But in all of that time, he'd never seen Lin-Manuel in person, like whether it be Hamilton or Freestyle Love Supreme. He'd never seen him perform. He'd never like run into him. Nothing. So we go back to & Juliet on the Friday, and who do we see walking down the aisle but Lin-Manuel Miranda?
I was going to say, I think you told me that story because we met up before you went to the Victoria Palace Theatre to see Hamilton.
Right.
And then, yeah, I'd driven back up to Sheffield and you told me that story after. But yeah, it's like you've got a Lin homing beacon that like when he's in the vicinity is a Lindar. I was trying to think of the word but couldn't think of it then. But yeah, exactly.
No, he said it took going all the way to & Juliet in the UK for him to see him.
It's brilliant.
I love it. So okay, we have a few minutes left. I want to be conscious of your time here, especially because it's getting rather late, isn't it? What time is it there?
So it's coming up to 9 o'clock here. Oh. So what? It's coming up to 1 o'clock your time. So it's not too late.
Yeah. Okay, cool. But I wanted to first of all congratulate you. You have one on the way. Very exciting.
Yeah. My wife's 21 weeks now. So it's getting to the stage where she's showing and the baby's kicking, and that's a weird and brilliant experience as well. And obviously because of COVID, we're doing online antenatal classes and stuff like that. So we did one earlier that was like 2 hours, whereas you'd normally be in a room full of other people, and they'd give you a plastic dummy baby to practice putting nappies on it and stuff like that, and how to hold it and how to bath it and stuff like that. It's all online on Zoom and all these apps, webinars and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a weird experience to be going through in the middle of a global pandemic and stuff like that. But yeah, brilliant at the same time.
Wow. Right. Life moves on, right? Whether we're
life keeps going. Yeah.
Wow. And I've posted one of the photos. Oh, I don't know if I did it on the cover photo here, but I've shared it, and I'm sure I'll share it again later, from your wedding, which was just one of the most stunning places I've ever seen with my own two eyes. It was like you got married in this castle. It was...
It's not quite a castle. I mean, you Americans like to throw the word castle around for anything that's like older than the country. And we've already been there, so I'm not going to go over old ground. But it wasn't quite a castle. It was, obviously in the UK, we've got a lot of like stately homes and stuff like that. So it was a place called Hassop Hall, which actually now is being bought by an American and turned into a care home. So thanks for that. But yeah, so it was a place that was in the Peak District countryside, which is a national park here. And it was brilliant. Well, we looked around a lot of different places before we picked somewhere to get married, but it was, you had got this long driveway up to this kind of stately home on the left. And then there was like a function room type outhouse barn type thing. And then you go inside and it's, if you imagine, you've got all these kind of big pictures on the wall, kind of, think kind of, 18th century Hamilton, which is, I'm sure why you loved it, like ballroom type thing. So yeah, set in the middle of the Peak District countryside. So yeah, it was, everyone says it, but it was one of those days that you will remember for the rest of your life and will go down as, one of your best days. So it was great that you could be there because at the time you'd flown over from Texas. So
Yeah. So I was honored to be invited, and I couldn't pass that up. Couldn't throw away my shot.
Another Hamilton reference. I got that one.
Yes, brilliant. So, okay, wait, back to that for a second. I know you said you didn't like look up anything beforehand, but like you had to have heard some of the songs beforehand, right?
Nope.
You never heard anyone sing My Shot?
No, only if it was you singing it at me and it just going straight over my head.
Which could have happened.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
could have easily happened. But no, like, you know, if, you know, like I said earlier, you know, if you're going to go and experience something like that for the first time, why would you look it up or watch YouTube clips? Or, you know, you want the whole immersive experience, don't you, before you go and see something like that? So no, never heard a Hamilton song, never read a review, never read a plot line. You know, I knew there was a lot of hype about it, and sometimes when there is that amount of hype about it, you know, it goes one or two ways. You either say, I have to see it, or you go, I'm all right, I'll leave it until either the hysteria's died down or whatever, you know.
Yeah. Wow. I'm glad.
It's a bit like if someone recommends Breaking Bad to you, it's like, do you go out and like buy the box set and like watch Breaking Bad and binge it all? Or, you know, do you wait till the hysteria's died down and then, yeah.
Totally. I feel that. That's fair. That's valid. And I would be remiss not to talk a little bit more about NJY Camps. And right now they're doing a fundraiser because just like everything with the world being kind of like shut down in certain places, like camp is canceled for the summer. And this was going to be the huge 100th celebration.
100th anniversary, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to give a shout out and see if there was anything you wanted to share about that.
Well, obviously, I still get regular emails actually from Anne and NJY. You know, I'm on the mail list, which is quite nice. You know, every now and again, I get sent a little YouTube or a Vimeo video that is like, you know, the year that was just gone, or 4th of July fireworks or whatever, and you kind of, yeah, you think back to. I mean, how old was I then? I was early in my 20s, and it was the first time I'd really gone traveling on my own. So it was an amazing experience all 3 of the years for different reasons. Yeah. And actually, funnily enough, my wife Gemma went to a different American summer camp and had a completely different sort of experience. You know, hers wasn't a Jewish summer camp. Hers was, I think it was a lot more of a kind of private camp. But it was kind of, yeah, so it was different in some ways, and you know the cultural experiences she had were kind of different to obviously NJY's, which is obviously a Jewish camp and things like that. But yeah, hearing about, you know, that it would have been the 100th year and it was going to be bigger and better than ever. It's there's a place that I know a lot of people hold very dear, and it's very, you know, it's changed a lot of people's lives and introduced, you know, two potentially sets of people who, you know, like you and me would have never met had it not been for, you know, NJY Camps. And, you know, some of my best friends and some of the people that came to the wedding had, you know, I'd met through NJY. So yeah, it's really sad to hear that that's the way. You know, obviously a lot of organizations are going to have to make tough decisions this year, maybe even into next year, however long this thing lasts. So yeah, I think, you know, me speaking personally, and obviously it's up to every individual, but, you know, I've donated to that fundraiser as well and tried to do, you know, whatever small bit I can to help them out. Cause, you know, it was as I said, it was a big part of my life for 2 or 3 years. And yeah, in some ways changed my life. And, you know, I came back from camp with more confidence, thinking, what do I want to do? And then it went into sports journalism. So yeah, would I have done that without NJY? Who knows? But it would, you know, it was part of the whole journey.
Beautifully said. Yes, NJY Camps most certainly changed my life. Having this connection with people, being able to be the assistant head of the lake taught me both, you know, like maturity and how to be in charge of a group and keep people safe, because like being at a lake, you know, and a lot of small children running around.
Eyes in the back of your head.
It is, yeah. And it's affected, like when I go to the pool or, you know, the beach, and like there's always that lifeguard in the back of my head that's like, all right, I'm looking around like, oh, is this parent paying attention? Because once you're a lifeguard, like you're always a lifeguard, right? You're always like having that like, hey, you should slow down. And they're like, you're not my mom. I'm like, I don't care. You should still slow down. There's so many memories of camp, and the ability to like be friends with people from around the world. Like we have friends that like David Coots that I still chat with over in New Zealand.
Yeah, it's like New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, you know, Israel, you know, you name it. Like you could probably rock up in a country that you didn't know and say, you know, if you flip through your Facebook friends, I'm sure you could find someone that you knew, couldn't you? So yeah,
it's amazing. Yeah, so that's what I want to share. Are there any other like nonprofits or charities that you want to make sure people know about?
No, I don't think so. I mean, that's the one at the moment. I mean, there are so many charities that, you know, I mean, people are kind of rightly so looking after number one at the moment and making sure their nearest and dearest are all right. But, you know, there are, you know, we talk about the theatre, you know, there's lots of, in the UK, the situation with the theatres is they can open for outdoor performances in 2 weeks' time again, but, you know, they don't know when they're going to be able to get people indoor to see shows again. And I know there's a lot of theatre companies that are having to look at the books and keep people on furlough in the UK. And, you know, that's created a lot of uncertainty for people. But, you know, there's grants coming out from the Arts Foundation in the UK that are trying to help theatres. But I know that the money's spread thinly, and yeah, I think everyone needs to look at what's important to them and what they like doing, whether or not it's theatre or it's sports or it's whatever, you know. Here in terms of football's back, but you know, there are other sports like ice hockey. We don't know when ice hockey in the UK is going to come back. It's potentially, you know, you can go and public skate in an ice rink again on the 25th of July. I think it's been announced last Thursday. But, you know, teams like the Sheffield Steelers and other teams they rely on bums on seats. You know, they need people in the crowd generating revenue, buying refreshments, that kind of thing to make the business model work, really. So there are, you know, and that extends to, you know, lower league football conference teams or whatever. So I think all I'd say is it's people should look at what's important to them. And if they think at the end of this, if that thing didn't exist, maybe think about a way that you can go and support that if you have the financial capabilities, of course.
Yes. So important. Yes. I noticed that the West End companies have gotten together. They have like this new design with like the show must go on, which is of course very near and dear to me. And I purchased like a shirt and a notebook that I'm waiting to come in. And so they have things like that you can like support the companies while also getting like a fun swag thing in return. So that's fun. You should check that out. And yeah, there are like your local food banks, and there's the Okra Project, which I've spoken about before, which really helps feed a lot of Black trans folk in the US. And that's a huge thing right now. So think of what's important to you, Spence. I love how you said that. What's important to you? What could you not imagine living without? And see how you can support them. See how you can be there for them, because we're all going through this, and hopefully things will change soon. Please wear a mask when you are out, and we will get through this somehow, some way, and hopefully be stronger because of it. Are there any final words, any thoughts that you came into today wanting to make sure to get out there? And where can people find you on social media?
So on social media, I'm on Twitter. I'm @_Peter Spencer, and that the majority of stuff that I'm doing on there is ice hockey interviews. So hopefully I've got one coming up that's going to be out at the early part of this week. So Monday or Tuesday. And it's kind of breaking news as it happens. So the next time there's an update or there's a signing, there might be some stuff on there. And then, yeah, that's the big one, really.
Perfect. Awesome. And y'all can find me at bwaySHO. That's bwaySHO, as you can see from this beautiful banner on the screen. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do click that button. And if you want to be a part of this super cool community called the Showtreons, I now have a bwaySHO Patreon. We do monthly video chats and trivia, and you get exclusive content and Ask Me Anything sessions. It's a lot of fun, and I appreciate all the support from those who have joined, and everyone who might not have joined but supports me anyway by watching. Y'all are super amazing. So thank you, and I appreciate all of you so much. And Spence, I appreciate you so much. It's so funny for people who are like, Spence, I thought his name was Peter. Peter Spencer. Once you have a camp name, it kind of sticks with you for life.
Yeah.
So
obviously, it was the alliteration, wasn't it? It was Spence Soccer, wasn't it? Because I was the soccer coach. You know,
yes.
there was no alliteration for the kids to remember with Peter. And you know, Americans can't really say the name Peter either. It's like Peter, or you know, you have to put an extra syllable in there, don't you?
Peter. And there was that other Peter Carlin, Logan. We had two Peters, and neither of them were
called Peter, were they?
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I will, of course, be in touch for forever. This is such a great friendship, and I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you chatting and sharing so much with us.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Bye.